here. Go back to Facebook here and Instagram there.
Oh, I can't. Sounds better.
And the girls I like just subscribe to my channel, so it's going great. Big thanks to Ampro Studios for making this happen tonight. I have been wanting to record an audiobook since before I wrote the actual book, I think. It's like, yeah, then it could be an audiobook. Let me just write the physical book first. And I did. But everybody listens to audiobooks. It's especially now, like in 2016, people definitely listen to audiobooks, but now it's over for these hoes. And by hoes, I mean paper books. There was a buzzing in the first. It was a diffuser. I'm really pro diffuser, for the record. Just can't have it when we're. Okay. How does that sound to you?
Sounds great.
I can't hear myself as much. So I'm gonna
Okay. Go ahead and hit the big knob.
Big knobs. And he's got a big knob.
That mic sounds great on you.
Okay, great.
That mic sounds great on you. We found your mic.
Oh, I think I already found my mic a little bit ago. Okay. Sorry. It was a yes. And he's got a big knob. It's checking our connection. Yeah. Over here. Do some pieces as a sticker.
Do you want any like comfy loungy pants or anything like that?
So I don't flash the camera? Nah.
Okay.
I like to keep it on brand. Tell me your Instagram again.
Oh, it's Ampro or
N-A-H.
no, that's cool. N-A-A-H. That's cool.
Cool.
Do you remember this day? I think you took that picture. I'm pretty sure you did take that picture.
Oh, yeah. Carl's back there.
Chat. Definitely wish I had something to set drinks that was closer to me.
Gotcha. No problem. You can do that.
So I would be a diva.
No, I'll just do this.
I should probably go back and way the mic up there.
Hello. Yes. That's how it should be. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Definitely want.
Just like trapped in now. I've trapped myself, so I have to do it. When it cuts out in my earphones, does that mean I've clipped?
Yes,
too far
that means
up?
that
Okay.
it's protecting your ears. So,
Cool.
yes.
Protections.
And in fact, here, let's do this. I'll come back. Just here to split the difference.
Samantha Jones. What an angel.
Let's go ahead and do a slate real quick,
Okay.
and we'll make sure everything's
I'm going to read the cover because there's exciting things on the cover.
perfect.
Rolling?
Rolling.
All right. Truth, Justice, and the American Whore. The Whore Next Door columnist Susie Q. That's me. And then on the back, wrapped in the American flag, making a case that will make you blush and rebel. Susie Q speaks her mind from her heart, and her words embody sex appeal, political activism, and good humor. This book collects the greatest hits from her unique sex column and features her original essays, with a bonus feature of black and white photographs by Isabel Dressler. These are the reviews. This is what I got people to say about me. Susie Q boldly draws back the curtain and reveals all in this intimate.
Before I wrote the actual.
What's going on? Oh, broadcast failed.
Oh,
That's okay.
Wanting to record audiobook.
Maybe it was too controversial for Russia. Okay. One down. Whoa! Off of Instagram too. Too hot for Facebook and Instagram. Ooh. This is perfect. Thank you. Okay. Let's dive in. Rolling. Acknowledgements. Every week since January of 2014, I've cranked out 700 words here. I feel like I need to
adjust a little bit.
myself a
Yeah,
little bit so I
absolutely.
can see and like still be facing the
Yeah,
mic.
100%. Sure, I'll get there. So we want to do a little bit higher.
Yeah, let's see. That's perfect. Right there. And then, yeah.
Just a little bit here.
Our hairs look so good, Michael. Can't stop it. Okay.
How's that?
Great. Woohoo! So this is 2016. Me. Acknowledgements. Every week since January of 2014, I have cranked out 700 words about sex in America today. My first big assignment for the SF Weekly was to write a 4,000-word feature story that would introduce me to the readers and launch my column, The Whore Next Door. I took the month of January to write Confessions of an American Whore, a mini memoir of my sex work journey so far. I've wanted to be a writer since the second grade, but I went the route of plays, poems, and rock and roll tours. I had never written something for the newspaper before, so there was a pretty steep learning curve. When I think about that first draft I sent to my editors, I cringe with embarrassment. I barely had any clue what I was doing. Luckily, there were plenty of people holding my hand along the way. My incredible partners and friends who graciously listened to my caffeine-crazed ideas and helped me craft my voice have also wiped my tears and steadied my hand when it all felt like too much. Thanks, guys. I have also had the privilege of working with editors that believe in me, even when my first drafts were basically terrible. Kate Conger, Brandon Reynolds, Giselle Velasquez, Peter Kane, they've all gone above and beyond the call of editor by giving me a shot and putting the final polish on my pieces so that the world thinks I'm much more eloquent than I actually am. Thanks, y'all.
Pause. You should take off your leather jacket.
Yes, I should. Would it be possible to have a less noisy, warm thing? Can I borrow
100%. I have a nice big
Sweater.
blanket. That's
or a
perfect blanket.
blanket? Yeah. It's just really wanted to wear that jacket.
I understand.
It's so cozy. Reminds me of San Francisco. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Soft and happy.
Soft and happy.
Let's take it from that that reading at the very
Yeah.
beginning here again. That sounds great.
Good catch, Michael. Okay.
Okay. Everyone hold. Okay, go ahead.
Acknowledgements. Every week since January of 2014. Acknowledgements. Every week from January of 2014 until mid 2017, I cranked out 700 words about sex in America today. My first big assignment for the SF Weekly was to write a 4,000-word feature story that would introduce me to their readers and launch my column, The Whore Next Door. I took the month of January to write Confessions of an American Whore, a mini memoir of my sex work journey so far. I've wanted to be a writer since the second grade, but I went the route of plays, poems, and rock and roll tours. I had never written something for the newspaper before, so there was a pretty steep learning curve. When I think about that first draft I sent to my editors, I cringe with embarrassment to this day. I barely had any clue what I was doing. Luckily, there were plenty of people holding my hand along the way. My incredible partners and friends who graciously listened to my caffeine-crazed ideas and helped me craft my voice have also wiped my tears and steadied my hand when it all felt like too much. Thanks, guys. I have also had the privilege of working with editors that believe in me, even when my first drafts were basically terrible. Kate Conger, Brandon Reynolds, Giselle Velasquez, and Peter Kane have all gone above and beyond the call of editor by giving me a shot and putting the final polish on my pieces so that the world thinks I'm much more eloquent than I actually am. Thanks, y'all. And of course, my perfect parents who cheered me on even when they didn't understand. My dad, who never pulled any punches when it came to constructive criticism and was keen to point out when I had knocked it out of the park and also when I had only got a single. And my mom, who often reminds me of the spell she cast during her pregnancy, wishing and praying that someday I would be a writer. Careful what you wish for, Mom. Thanks, you too. This book is an opportunity to step back and really look at the story I've been telling. It's a love story for sure. There's sad parts and even a few scary parts. Navigating love, sex, and money in this great nation is no small feat. Doing sex work where it is currently criminalized is bold, and putting your face on every street corner in San Francisco next to the word whore is possibly stupid. And yet, this feels like it is, without a doubt, exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. In Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, he tells the novice writer he is in correspondence with, "Find out the reason that commands you to write. See whether it has spread its roots into the very depths of your heart. Confess to yourself whether you would have to die if you were forbidden to write. This most of all, ask yourself in the most silent hour of your night, must I write? Dig into yourself for a deep answer. And if this answer rings out in assent, if you meet this solemn question with a strong, simple, I must, then build your life in accordance with this necessity. Your whole life, even into its humblest and most indifferent hour, must become a sign and witness to this impulse. For me, the impulse has never been about the craft, but rather the purpose. In the wee small hours of the morning, I know in my bones that what I must do is not simply right, but rather make this world a more beautiful, true, and just place. In the most silent hour of night, I ask myself, must I do this? And the answer is always strong and simple. I must. Dun, dun, dun,
Nice.
dun, 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 dun.
Most
Okay, let's
fucking
go back.
monster truck jam outside.
I'm gonna pee real quick. Oh boy, here we go. Please. Thank you for that blanket. I feel very protected in there.
Oh my god, it's one of the best.
It's so nice. Your guys' house is so cozy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That is the door that doesn't close nice. The damn bathroom door.
Hey, did you know that 1 in 3 does are bad?
I'm not mad.
I'm not either.
Why you mad?
I'm so excited. I'm ready when you are. 1 and 3. Hoes are mad. I'm not mad. But yeah, I don't think Samantha's mad. So.
We're going to come back to that top section after. We can continue. I'm just listening down for a little spot thing. Yep, there it is. Cool guy. So
Okay.
here's what we can do. I can do a punch in and out like I would do with like a musician, right? And
Yeah.
if you want to read along with it, no.
Yeah, totally. I'll go all the way back up to like the beginning of that paragraph.
Right there.
Right after when I say thanks, y'all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want me to punch you in after the thanks you all?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I'll give you a minute.
Okay. And of course, my perfect parents who cheered me on even when they didn't understand. My dad, who never pulled any punches when it came to constructive criticism and was always keen to point out when I had either knocked it out of the park or only gotten a single. And my mom, who often reminds me of the spell she cast during her pregnancy, wishing and praying that someday I would be a writer. Careful what you wish for, Mom. Thanks, you too. Thank you.
The last tail end of that car, that vehicle, I apologize. So we'll,
Okay.
and that's it.
Okay, great.
Just that section. And I'll punch you in right after the thanks.
Okay. This book is an opportunity to step back and really look at the story I've been telling.
Mm. Okay, that was it, right?
Mhm.
Okay, let me do a little movement here. And I think we'll have it. Just need to get the pacing of it. Woo-hoo-hoo! Too good at my job. Almost.
Yes.
Yeah, right about there. Ooh, one little spot. Where are you at?
Recording is hard work. That's why you hire someone to do it. What's the name of your website?
Nah, that's cool.
Nah, that's cool.
Yeah.
On Instagram.
That's the running joke. For years, when you try and run a studio, you try and get good clients over. Come on to my place. Nah, that's cool.
Well, that's not what we say. I'm like, okay, cool. Sunday? I'm available Sunday. Can we do it Sunday?
Perfect. Perfect. Absolutely
All
perfect.
right. Pour some water.
Absolutely crushed it. It's perfect.
We're ready for the prologue.
Yep. Ready for the prologue. Let me do one little quick. Clean. 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 Can't even tell.
Oh.
All right. We're gonna do what's called a merging, and the audio has been merged. Boom. And we're going to select unused and keep our flow moving. And this is how we outwork Pro Tools.
Okay, I'm excited about this.
Okay.
You good?
Rolling.
Prologue. Dearest reader or listener, Americans are obsessed with talking about work. Americans are obsessed with talking about work. When strangers meet on the train, at a party, or on a date, one person will almost always inquire about the other's profession within the first 5 minutes. And when the pervasive attitude about my job is negative, backed up, and reinforced by laws that criminalize me and my profession, coming out as a sex worker is a terrifying prospect. My mother's reaction when I told her I dance naked for a living was one of excited fascination, like I had just told her I'd been accepted into Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which, truth be told, was kind of what working at the late great Lusty Lady Theater felt like, but more on that later. My husband's mother, however, chose to never speak to me again. Perhaps you, dear listener, would make the same choice if your son brought home a girl like me. Many would. But here we are. I don't know you. You could be a cop, a serial killer, or my mother-in-law. You could wish me harm, think that I should be thrown in jail, or at the very least, look down on me because I have sex for money. Maybe you've never met a sex worker before. Perhaps most of your information about sex work has come from Law and Order, and you think that something about the sex industry is inherently harmful and dangerous. Maybe you think I'm naive, annoying, or at the very least, misguided. And maybe, hopefully, you don't think any of those. And maybe, hopefully, you don't think any of those things. Maybe you are a whore yourself, or maybe you have loved a whore. Maybe you still do. Or maybe you just like the photo of me on the cover and wanted to know more. That's okay too. For whatever reason you've chosen to take my little book into your hands and sit with these words, thank you. People fear what they do not understand, and many people do not understand sex work, their feelings about it, the realities of it, or the people who do it. So the fact that you are brave enough to look at these issues, ask the hard questions, and sit with the feelings of fear or discomfort that may arise is commendable. So, let's begin. Hi, my name is Susie Q, and I'm a sex worker. Ba, 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 ba.
You there for a pause?
Barely, I can get going.
Okay.
I'm gonna tweet this. All right. Act 1. Act 1, origin stories. Confession. January 29th, 2014. During Game 5 of the 2010 World Series, my dad and I sat side by side at a sushi bar in my Central Coast hometown. We ordered 2 scallop hand rolls and 2 sake bombs. The head rush of the wasabi and the calming heat of the rice wine dulled the anxiety of a day spent navigating ICU doctors and nursing assistants. My mom was in the hospital awaiting brain surgery. She had been diagnosed with a rare cranial bleed that had rapidly claimed her ability to walk, speak, eat, and breathe on her own. I dropped everything I had going on in San Francisco and drove down the peninsula to be by her side. By the opening pitch of Game 5, I hadn't been to work in more than a week. I had recently quit my horrible retail job at a stationery store in Pacific Heights and started dancing naked full-time at the Lusty Lady Theater in North Beach. My dad didn't know that yet. But that night I was considering telling him. I feared he'd be upset or disappointed, and I wasn't sure he'd want to know why I'd chosen this new profession. I feared he'd be upset or disappointed, and I was sure he'd want to know why I'd chosen this new profession. I've heard that your first year in San Francisco is the hardest, and I absolutely found that to be the case. Even working full-time at my retail job, I barely made enough money to make ends meet. The first month I lived there, I didn't have enough to buy groceries, so I rationed myself 1 piece of pita bread with butter each day, left over from when my aunt had taken me out for Persian food. The first month I lived there, I didn't have enough to buy groceries, so I rationed myself 1 piece of pita bread with butter each day, left over from when my aunt had taken me out for Persian food to welcome me to the city. For lunch, I'd go to the La Boulange bakery on Union Street and fill up on free olives and tiny French pickles. I also hated my retail job. Hawking rhinestone-covered greeting cards to Danielle Steele and the upper crust of the city took a little piece of my soul each day. But it wasn't just financial pressures that prompted the leap into sex work. I had read about the Lusty Lady in college. It was a unicorn in the adult industry, a worker-owned, unionized peep show where alternative looks and attitudes were celebrated. Sex work had always intrigued me, and whenever money got tight post-college, I would cruise the Craigslist adult services listings and contemplate the option. One of my childhood babysitters was a retired San Francisco stripper who had danced on Broadway in the early 1980s. She told me stories of champagne bubble baths and dancing the night away. It certainly sounded like much more fun than my current position. So I decided to audition. I didn't think they would hire me. I was chubbier than your average stripper and had always thought that my body would hold me back from doing any kind of sex work. But it didn't. They hired me immediately, and before I knew it, I was spinning on a pole in 6-inch heels. As it turns out, I love dancing naked. For a while, I was still working my retail job. When I got off work at 5 p.m. each day, I'd hop on Muni with my stripper heels and my purse and transform from frumpy retail girl to powerful goddess of sex and mystery. I felt like I had a delicious secret, and it made the hours at my straight job a little less excruciating. At the end of the shift, I'd be tired, and my feet and knees would throb, but I'd also be exhilarated. Soon, I made enough money at the Lusty to abandon my day job altogether and make the leap into doing sex work full-time. My dad had always been supportive of my endeavors in art and music, but I wasn't sure how he'd react to my recent pivot to the adult industry. He was also in a union.
Let's take that last section.
From,
Yeah, right before about your dad.
okay, yeah. So. For a while, I was still working my retail job. When I got off work at 5 p.m. each day, I'd hop on Muni with my stripper heels and my purse and transform from frumpy retail girl to powerful goddess of sex and mystery. I felt like I had a delicious secret, and it made the hours at my straight job a little less excruciating. At the end of
Let's hold. Cool guy.
cool day. At the end of the shift, I'd be so tired, and my feet and knees would throb, but I'd also be exhilarated. Soon, I made enough money at the Lusty to abandon my day job altogether and make the leap into doing sex work full time. My dad had always been supportive of my endeavors in arts and music, but I wasn't sure how he'd react to my recent pivot to the adult industry. He was also in a union. I grew up going to protests and hearing lectures on the power of the people.
Just take that last line again.
Let me finish making noise 1 second.
He was also in a union. I grew up going to protests and hearing lectures on the power of the people. Blue-collar values and union pride were an important part of our household. That's partially why I ended up at the Lusty. We talked baseball that night instead of feelings, even though baseball makes my dad cry way more than any emotional conversation. Then, Edgar Renteria hit the 3-run homer in the 7th inning, and everything shifted. The Giants pulled ahead, and it looked like they might actually take the series for the first time in half a century. It was a night for miracles, so I just went for it. Made bold by the sake and the magic of baseball, I came out to my father about being a sex worker. I didn't expect him to be proud, but he was. Without having to explain, my dad understood that sex workers needed labor rights just like any other worker. Brian Wilson took the mound.
Let's hold right there for a minute.
Yeah. Hard work.
One more cool guy there.
Baxter back here.
Yeah, I hear him
Dippity dap, dip, dapping away.
tapping away. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Brian Wilson took the mound as the closing pitcher. It was the bottom of the 9th. "Fear the beard," my father shouted. "Fear the beard," my father shouted at the television and ordered another round of sake while we watched the final batters crumble under Wilson's prowess. When Wilson raised his eyes to the heavens in the wake of the historic win, my dad and I stood up and started high-fiving the sushi chefs. My confession hadn't changed a thing. There are many different types of sex work: escorting, stripping, porn, webcam modeling, fetish services, and many others. When I entered the industry, I dove in headfirst and tried as many different kinds of work as I could. My journey soon took me beyond the Lusty and into the thriving world of San Francisco's oldest profession. My career change had come just in the nick of time. My mother's brain surgery left her unable to work and had given my father the new role of full-time caregiver. Sex work provided me the luxuries of a high hourly wage and a flexible schedule that allowed me to visit regularly, take her to doctor's appointments, and help out financially on occasion.
Let's hold for a second.
Hold my hand. Sometimes you just gotta channel.
Sometimes you gotta do it.
You gotta do it.
Get that Darius.
Mhm. Idiot.
Everything's delicious.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
They have to burp.
Oh yeah, and, you know it never like comes quick. when you have to.
Ooh.
There you go. Nice.
Ooh. Sorry, one. Embarrassing.
I'm going to do one thing here real quick.
Only
Pause.
for the bonus tracks, you have to pay extra for the births. Seriously, people will.
That's where we're going to start from.
Good?
Mhm.
But I have a suspicion that I would have inevitably become a sex worker, even without the circumstances of my mother's illness. I grew up idolizing historic figures like Mae West and Gypsy Rose Lee, outspoken women who used sexuality to leverage their careers. I saw that female sexuality was used to sell clothes, food, cars, and liquor, yet in the United States, it is illegal to sell sex itself. That just didn't make sense to me. I was also fascinated by human intimacy and desire. I went on a lot of OkCupid dates and had a lot of one-night stands in my exploration of my own sexual identity. When I moved to San Francisco, I discovered that I... Yes?
That's what happened to be the coffee machine, of
Oh,
course.
great.
Doing whatever it wanted to be doing.
Like,
Gideon. When I moved to San Francisco?
Mhm. I think that's... I think right there,
Okay.
right in that space.
I was also fascinated by human intimacy and desire. I went on a lot of OkCupid dates and had a lot of one-night stands in my exploration of my own sexual identity. When I moved to San Francisco, I discovered that I enjoyed and excelled at kinks and fetishes beyond my wildest dreams, and I was ravenous for more. By the time I began my career at the Lusty, I knew more about sexuality than your average 24-year-old. Eventually, being promiscuous no longer thrilled me, and I decided that if I was going to have a just for fun, one-time encounter with someone who was only mediocre at sex, I wanted to be compensated with more than just pizza and beer. Despite my logical understanding that sex work could be an empowered choice, I was still afraid to make the jump from stripper to hooker. The first time I took an appointment, I was terrified that I wouldn't know what to do or that the client would be rough or mean. Instead, I intuitively knew exactly what to do. The client was attractive and kind, and I made more money in 1 hour than I would have made in an entire shift at the Lusty. I lived in the inner Richmond, but to take appointments with clients, I would commute across the bridge to a small apartment in the East Bay. The building was modern and secure, but the walk to and from the BART station always made me feel vulnerable. I don't usually get scared when I walk around the Bay Area. It's my home, but I was not used to carrying such large sums of money around, and it made me so nervous. The idea of going to the police had also shifted for me. Being a sex worker could now put me at risk for incarceration, even if I was the victim of a crime. I tucked the money I had made for the day under the arches of my feet in my canvas tennis shoes.
Let's take that right there, that last line. Excellent. Right there in that space.
The idea of going to the police had also shifted for me. Being a sex worker could now put me at risk for arrest and incarceration, even if I was the victim of a crime. I tucked the money I had made for the day under the arches of my feet in my canvas tennis shoes. It made the shoes too tight and the walk to the train painful. I must have looked ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. One more time. That's where I'm going to do it right there.
I must have looked ridiculous. A freckle-faced girl with an overstuffed bag full of dildos and cheap lingerie, limping down the street at full speed. Riding back to the city on BART, I tried not to make eye contact with anyone for fear that my secret identity would somehow be revealed. In hindsight, I'm sure I wasn't fooling anyone, since the riding crop I used for sessions was a bit too big for my bag and poked the people I stood next to when the train was crowded. My paranoia was perhaps a bit overblown at first, but not unwarranted. I sometimes feared arrest, robbery, but I rarely feared my clients. Though the criminalization of my work leaves me vulnerable to police and those who wish to harm me, I've been fortunate enough to have largely positive experiences at work. The Bay Area is home to a diverse group of eccentric people with disposable incomes. My clients are often nerdy and always interesting, and often surprisingly endearing. San Francisco offers a buffet of sexual explorations, from festive polyamorous play parties to elaborate professional dungeons. I've had the opportunity to explore these things, but many of my clients have not. Some are in relationships that do not allow them to explore their kinks. Some have professional identities that make public exploration impossible. And some are simply curious and want to explore their desires with a professional before embarking on a journey of their own.
Let's hold for a second. One second.
Yeah. What if she got more lips? Not a lot to play with my lips. I need to pee too. Look at she. She.
Well, you focus.
I'm gonna go use the restroom and fill up liquids real quick.
Yeah, I gotta stop drinking this coffee.
No way.
Never.
No way, man. There was no
I would
way.
love some more tea and like
Absolutely.
lemon. And...
You know, I don't have any more lemon. Actually, I didn't have any in the first place.
Oh.
I apologize. But I will keep the water right now.
Yeah.
You look so nice.
It looks cool in here. I've never seen it with like cameras and the whole thing. Yeah. How you doing? It sounds like a angry T-Rex or something. Well, I'm glad that that noise was a microphone that I don't own.
Are you sure it was the microphone?
Yeah, this is the microphone. It had just had a high self noise.
Oh yeah.
Hey, microphone, why don't you shut up?
Well, I mean, they're touted as they're supposed to be relatively quiet, but why not? I think I just pushed it to its limit.
Well, why are you doing that?
I don't know.
Was that scary? Don't ever make that noise again.
Can't help it. You made me laugh. You made me laugh while I was coughing.
I know.
What?
I'm just kidding.
Blanqueta. Oh, yes.
Want
Ted.
to release Cal for a moment?
Ooh, Callie, I miss her. She's such an angel snoot. She was made of angelic snootage. Hey. Hey, Apple. Hey,
Keys are nice and cool.
It's just cool. It's just yeah, no, absolutely.
Did you want another tea bag?
Yes, I would. I hate to cry. Can I steal one of these mandarin oranges?
Oh my god.
It's like any citrus.
It's like
so
it's my favorite thing.
these are great. What an excellent snack to have on hand.
That's so funny.
I always have
Oh my god, so good. It just like brings me the fuck back.
Seriously, I've been living.
Put
those
these in
things
my
down.
writer. Like this is gonna be a must moving forward.
You got it, girl. They're always here.
I love that. Really says a lot about a person, like what kind of snacks they always have on hand.
Oh, it totally does.
Yeah. For our house is apples, bananas, like fruit snacks.
Oh, see, I almost got Gushers.
Mm-hmm.
I almost did, but then I was like,
No, it's for the best.
But it's like it was a big box too, and it was but it was only like a 3-flavor pouch. It was like a spacey edition,
Go.
mystery flavor.
Ones.
Have you just shooting a ton of footage, and then you're gonna make Percy edit it.
Okay, great. Cool. I was like, what was I had in my mouth that was so delicious, mandarins? Really made me forget how great that life was now. Okay, if my other partner Jackson is ever in town long enough to do Disneyland again, I also really want to do medieval times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I see him looking at your medieval times thing. I'm getting jealous. Ooh. Thank you so much for these socks. I thought I was like,
Oh, no problem.
these shoes feel like really good without socks, you know? So I didn't want to wear them, you know? They're new and they're just like nice and good, but
Sometimes
socks are
you
crucial
just
to being
need them.
warm. If it's like genuinely cold, like you gotta be wearing socks, man. Like
Oh, yeah.
Michael got us these very cute matching yellow hats. So I've become a hat person this year finally.
I'm living life as a hat person the last few years. I don't know what's going on.
It's great. Hat life. I need a hat that covers my face more.
Oh, just a big floppy hat.
More like a baseball hat to like,
Mm.
you know, like a basic girl hat. My friend Lydia makes ones that like, she has one that says whore on it, but in Japanese.
I like
She's
that.
one that says needs allowance or like,
I mean, I'm coming from a person that has pothead and Chinese on their neck.
yeah.
Like, yes.
Yeah. Mhm. Well, trade show season.
Yeah, I'm too
We're
good.
giving out all kinds of free shit. There you go.
Fuck, I'm too good at my job.
Andrew Oranges, what's up?
Come
I'm so glad I'm not the only one.
If someone told you this was sea creatures, you would believe them.
Yeah, I just might.
Mm-hmm.
If they said it was deep sea creatures,
Mhm,
I'd
mhm.
believe it.
I fed him one
These
earlier, and I was like, here's your larva. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
totally.
They're anglerfish larvae, actually, from the deep sea
Oh,
canyons.
Yes, I believe it. Take that, run with it.
Mm. Mm. You gotta get on TikTok. Gotta make a TikTok for the studio.
That's the thing.
And you literally like don't have to do anything except like turn it on when you have people. You know, it's because it's just like it's a platform for sharing content. I'm figuring out how to put my music on TikTok, which will be cool.
Okay.
Whew. That Mandarin thing, like low key, gave me a sugar rush. Like zing. Oh yes. Oh, what the? All right. Shall we?
Michelle.
The Bay Area is
Just
home.
1 second. Sorry. Let me get a little bit of space on the end of this one. Oh, of course, cool guy.
The Bay Area is home to a diverse group of eccentric people with disposable incomes. My clients are often nerdy and always interesting, and generally surprisingly endearing. San Francisco offers a buffet of sexual explorations, from festive polyamorous play parties to elaborate professional dungeons. I've had the opportunity to explore those things, but many of my clients have not. Some are in relationships that don't allow them to explore their kinks. Some have professional identities that make public exploration impossible. And some are simply curious and want to explore their desires with a professional before embarking on a journey of their own. Sometimes my clients lost my place. Here we go. Sometimes my clients and I have a great deal in common. If my life had gone a different way and I had ended up in a more traditional lifestyle, I too might be paying someone to tie me up and tickle me on a Thursday afternoon. However, not everyone I see is kinky. Some are looking for something as vanilla as a glass of wine and a heated conversation about the merits of Star Trek versus Star Wars. The reason they come to see me are as varied as their desires. And then there's the elephant in the room: infidelity. I'll say it, many of my clients are married. Some of their spouses know that they see me, others don't. Yeah, bitch, I said it.
There's a big old dark
Inside.
outside.
Hmm?
Anybody that's ready for it,
You what? Weeds? Weedian?
roll a blunt.
Wow.
Non-tobacco blunt.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me get
We
back.
gotta get to at least Act 2. Most of my married clients see their time with me as something that
1 second. I'm sorry, Susie.
he's like 90% like professional, AV documentarian, and like 10%, 10 to 5,000% like pushy dad with a video camera at
I
the
love
school
it.
play.
I love it.
But
Because that's what separates the men from the boys.
That's actually who he is deeply on the inside only, but it's just with a lot of fancy equipment.
Thanks, Ted Bowler.
He's Ted Bowler. That's Ted Bowler. Dude, also Amuanush though is who I see when fucking Perry May was born. The reason she hasn't gone like nuts on social media is because she was paparazzi'd for her first like 4 years of life. Just like Betty May, Betty May, Betty May over here, look at me, Betty May.
Oh, that's funny.
Greatest man.
All right.
You ready? Most of my married clients see their time with me as something that enables them to stay in a marriage that, aside from a lack of intimacy, is successful. Unlike with having an affair, though, I will never text a client in the middle of the night when he is home with his family. I will never get upset when a client chooses to spend time with his family rather than with me. I would never expect nor desire for my client to leave his wife to be with me. I am a professional, and I am pro-marriage. I intend my services to support the relationships that matter to my clients the most, not to destroy them. People ask me, what if he's ugly? I tell them that my attraction to a client is largely irrelevant. When I find my clients attractive, it's a bonus, but it's not a requirement. The service I provide is companionship, and when someone is respectful, generous, and communicative, I am almost certain to have a good time with them. I am reminded of when I used to work as a waitress. It wouldn't matter if someone was attractive or interesting, I would still serve them. But certain customers are more pleasant than others, and that always made the job more enjoyable. Sex work is surprisingly similar. But like most people, I also have hard days at work. Sometimes I don't want to put on makeup and lingerie and exude old Hollywood sexuality and Sometimes I don't want to put on makeup and lingerie and exude old Hollywood sexuality and coquettish moans. Some nights I'd rather stay at home with my cat and watch Game of Thrones. But I imagine most people feel that way now and then about their job. I chose sex work for many reasons, but mainly because I enjoy it. I excel at it, and it allows me to live in the city that I love. I understand that choosing sex work makes me vulnerable to criminalization and stigma, but seeing myself as an entrepreneur fulfills me in a way that work never has before. People hope to find a job that is best suited. Very cool.
Super cool guy.
Very cool.
The coolest.
She did a burp. She did.
Close up on burp.
Sorry. Comes in threes. So nice. So mint. It's good?
Mhm.
People hope to find a job that is best suited to their skills and interests. And for me, that job is sex. In November of 2012, Prop 35, the Californians Against Sexual Exploitation Act, landed on the ballot.
Great. I'm going to take that one.
Fireworks!
Backfire works.
Baby, you're fine.
It is almost 9:30.
That's where we're going to start from.
Okay. People hope to find a job that is best suited to their skills and interests, and for me, that job is sex. In November of 2012, Prop 35, the Californians Against Sexual Exploitation Act, landed on the ballot. Although the guiding principle of the bill, to crack down on the sexual exploitation of minors, was noble, it was a confusing piece of legislation riddled with problematic components. The main sticking point was that Prop 35 sought to expand the definition of trafficking. One of those expansions states that any person who lives with or derives support from someone who is a prostitute is considered guilty of human trafficking and can face a minimum of 8 years in state prison. This definition took on absurd implications.
Going down all the way up.
I'm so sad about your jacket.
I was just too cool for it.
Careful. Mm.
Motherfucker. What it is.
Shidium. Ooh. Good job.
Okay, that didn't work very well.
Will you plug that into the back book, please? La la la. Like baby. I'm gonna start there.
Okay, that's where we're gonna go from.
This definition took on absurd implications. If Prop 35 passed, then my partner, who shares a home with me, could be charged with human trafficking. Or, if I paid bills for my mother after her brain surgery, she could potentially be charged as my trafficker. Sex workers already face social stigma, but Prop 35 provided more of a legal framework to reinforce it. When Prop 35 was put on the ballot and sex workers got wind of it, we were very concerned, said Carol Lee, one of the founders of the sex worker rights movement in America. Lee actually coined the term sex worker in 1978 to reduce the stigma associated with the word prostitute.
Take off the squeaky jacket.
Squeaky. Let me know how squeaky your jacket is. Till you try to make an audiobook.
Remember that jingle?
Carol Lee actually coined the term sex worker in 1978 to reduce the stigma associated with the word prostitute. The sex worker community vehemently spoke out against Prop 35, but it seemed the arguments fell on deaf ears. The proposition was almost guaranteed to pass. Former Facebook executive Chris Kelly provided the major funding for a campaign that seemed to have an endless budget for billboards and commercials depicting images of nameless young girls with chains around their wrists and teary eyes to evoke the horrors of human trafficking. If I had seen Prop 35 on the ballot and didn't know any better, I may have voted for it too. Everyone's against trafficking and sexual slavery, Lee said. Of course, issues of force and coercion are of concern to sex workers. At the same time, usually that's done in a way to disempower us, and Prop 35 was no exception. Sex trafficking is an appalling crime in which a person is forced, coerced, or exploited into sexual labor. It is prevalent worldwide, and San Francisco is currently not immune. Sex work, however, is a business transaction between two consenting adults. It is simply my job. When sex work is criminalized under the same laws that criminalize trafficking, it drives the industry further underground. And results in a climate where consensual sex workers cannot be involved in the fight against human trafficking. If I meet someone who is working under force or coercion, I wouldn't be able to report the crime without facing legal ramifications myself. Anonymous reporting is potentially an option, but if sex workers like myself could actually work with law enforcement and legislators, then real atrocities like rape, assault, forced labor, and trafficking could be more effectively addressed. I just have to pause for a second,
Absolutely.
because in California now, that's true. SB 233 became law in January of this year, and sex workers can now report crimes such as human trafficking, rape, assault, robbery without fear of being arrested for prostitution in California. That's real now. That's cool. Take that, past self. Guess what, bitch? Gets better. It gets better for these hoes. All right, here we go. It's getting good.
It's just, do you want to?
Yeah, we'll keep going. As Election Day 2012 grew near, I knew I had to do something more than just cast my vote. Then I remembered a road trip I had recently taken with my boyfriend. We were listening to one of filmmaker Kevin Smith's podcasts. Smith is kind of a podcasting evangelist. So when he started to rant about how everyone should make one, my boyfriend turned down the stereo and said, with a twinkle in his eye, "You should start a podcast." So I called up a friend who had some audio equipment and some know-how, and we recorded the first episode in our living room. Our mission was to humanize people in the sex industry by sharing their stories, art, and voices. I thought that if more people understood the lived experiences of real sex workers, then maybe they'd reconsider voting yes on laws that criminalize them and their families. We crossed our fingers as we uploaded the first episode to iTunes.
Let's hold real quick.
This is so fun.
She's doing great.
Prop 35 passed by an overwhelming majority. It was an expected disappointment, but it still stung. However, the response we received from the first few episodes of our podcast was incredible. People from all over the country were listening. We got positive responses from sex workers, clients, allies, and even people who just liked podcasts. We got positive responses from sex workers, clients, allies, and even people who just liked podcasts. We initially titled the show This American Whore, but soon received a cease and desist letter from Ira Glass. We initially titled the show This American Whore, but soon received a cease and desist letter from Ira Glass and Chicago Public Media, who insisted that the name of our show was infringing on their trademarked radio program and podcast, This American Life. Miraculously, the story, which was broken by Chris Hall of the SF Weekly, went a little bit viral and garnered a great deal of national media attention, prompting Mr. Glass himself to release this statement. Bum, bum, bum. I wish I could do a good Ira Glass impression. I'll try. It's recently been reported in the press that we're asking the podcast, This American Whore, to change their name. There's been a suggestion that we're singling them out because of their content. We're not. I've listened to This American Whore. I find them charming. Charming. It's an interesting podcast and a window into a world that's very different from my daily life for sure. I'm glad they're out there making these, and I hope they continue. But the way trademark law works is that we or any business with a trademark name has to protect that name. If you don't take action when you hear about people knocking off your name and get them to stop, you could lose your trademark rights. Whenever we find out about any podcast with names similar to ours, our lawyers review what action would be appropriate. Some names and shows are parodies, which are protected class under the law. Some names and shows are parodies, which are a protected class under the law. Some have audiences that are so negligible that they pose no trademark threat. Last year, we had an issue with a podcast called This American Startup, and they eventually agreed to modify their name. In the past, we've taken similar actions, which didn't get press attention. There are some other shows and podcasts out there, still with names similar to ours, that our lawyers are planning to approach. This American Horror is not being singled out. I wish them the best. Make more podcasts. I'll keep listening. If I lose this job and become a sex worker, I hope you'll have me on as a guest. Just change your name.
Let's take it from that last section there. That's right. I'm going to start there. I'm going to punch you right on the I wish.
Pardon me.
Right there.
I wish them the best. Make more podcasts. I'll keep listening. If I lose my job and become a sex worker, I hope you'll have me on as a guest. Just change your name. People were really coming for Ira Glass, for the record. And it was incredibly flattering to learn that our audience was like not different enough from Chicago Public Media and This American Life's audience. And that we were like, you know, big enough. Anyway, best thing that could have happened. First Amendment attorney Mark Randazza, who graciously offered his counsel pro bono, advised us to do just that, and thus the Whorecast was born. Months later, Mr. Glass's people sent over a press release to the SF Weekly, asking if they wanted to interview him about...
Let's take that right there from that section. If we could just get the asking if we...
asking if they wanted to interview him about his...
1 second, I'm sorry, Susie.
Asking if they wanted to interview him about his new stage play. His new stage play.
Grand finale.
Oh, that is what that is right now? Yeah, 3 minutes.
What is it?
Disneyland fireworks.
Oh.
Listen here. Just that line right there. Whenever you're ready.
Asking if they wanted to interview him about his new show, 3 acts, 2 dancers, 1 radio host.
Yeah, that guy was... I'm going to move this. No, it's cool, bro. I'm not working here. There it is. Boom. Okay.
The folks at the Weekly said they definitely wanted to interview him, provided that the sex worker podcaster he had trademark beef with could be the one who interviewed him. This was essentially my big journalistic break. So here's the Ira Glass interview podcast with the Whorecast's Susie Q, as published in the San Francisco Weekly, November 12th, 2013.
Let's do that cut line one more time. Right there.
So here's the Ira Glass interview podcast with the Whorecast's Susie Q, as published in the San Francisco Weekly, November 12th, 2013.
My bad.
No worries.
One more time whenever you're comfortable.
Ira Glass interview podcast with Whorecast's Susie Q, as published in the San Francisco Weekly, November 12th, 2013. It was a cool February morning when I got an email from the lawyers representing Chicago Public Media and Ira Glass. My heart sank. There goes my shot, I thought. I've pissed off the most important person in podcasting, and I've only been at this 3 months. I had just launched my own podcast about sex work, then titled This American Whore. Clever title, right? The folks over at the award-winning podcast This American Life thought so as well. Turns out I was infringing on their trademark. Trademark law is nuanced and super hard to understand, but I was still facing a lawsuit if I didn't change the name of the show. As much as the media tried to spin it as a David versus Goliath story, it wasn't. All that really happened was our lawyers talked for a while. Ira released a real nice statement, and then we all decided that changing the name to the Whorecast was the best decision for everyone. We parted ways on good terms, but I continued to worry that Glass would hold some kind of grudge or think poorly of me in the future. Flash forward 6+ months later, I get a call from the SF Weekly telling me Glass will be doing a show at the North Theater in November and had asked if I would like to interview him. We don't often get second chances in life, but I felt like this might be mine. I hoped that if I just got a chance to actually talk to him and explain that I truly meant no offense, maybe he'd forgive my misstep. Truly, I was terrified. As the phone rang, I felt sweat trickle down my sides. I was hoping maybe there would be a secretary I would talk to first, maybe some kind of Ira Glass handler or personal assistant, but no. He picked up and said, "Hello?" just like any other human. I've heard him talk about prison, politics, and even prostitution, but I had never heard him talk directly to me. It was surreal. It turns out we have a bunch in common. Not only are we podcasters and storytellers, we're also both theater nerds, which is why I'm so excited to see his show, 3 acts, 2 dancers, 1 radio host. It's an opportunity to do what he does best, telling stories, but this time with a bigger toolbox: lights, dancers, music, and stage pictures. As a live theater junkie myself, I'm sure it'll be right up my alley. As I hung up the phone, I felt like I had just finished a marathon. My mouth was dry and I was out of breath. It had been one of the more awkward conversations in my life, but it had also been one of the most magical. At the end of the day, Glass is one of my heroes, and getting the opportunity to interview him was no less than a dream come true.
We take a second here.
I'm going to pee really quick. So many liquids. Gotta keep the flow going. Can't be tense. What?
I think I saw the soft mother list for Las Vegas.
Oh, okay, cool. We need to talk about March and like send photos probably.
Is your dog okay?
It's hard to beat Doge. Okay. Medium. I'm ready.
Okay. Just doing one little quick edit here. And then we will.
No worries. Mm.
How's that pace feel? Feel okay?
Yeah.
Between this-
Great.
Feel okay? Pace between those two?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, great.
getting ahead of a little bit of editing here. Just a little
Cool.
bit.
Smart.
Some of this is just
Best
open
to
here.
just do it as you go, then it's done. No, I guess this is more like 200 pages.
Good pace.
Sell the shit out of this thing.
Great.
It's a really good, like, quiet snack.
A quiet snack.
I brought a banana for that exact reason. I ate my apple in the car. I was like, I'm gonna have a banana.
It's a quiet snack.
She's eating bread
I
over
saw
there.
that too, and I was just like, uh-huh.
Not
Not someone to grab.
Okay, little editing done.
All right,
It's just doing a little rendering right now.
great.
I have more to do, but we can get back on it. Okay. So, and here we are.
A few months later, the SF Weekly offered me the sex column, and it felt like all my Carrie Bradshaw dreams might become true too. Not too long ago, before I went pro, I was just a 14-year-old. I was not 14. Maybe in my head. Maybe in my head. Not too long ago, before I went pro, I was just a 24-year-old slut who started an anonymous blog about her OkCupid adventures. I knew I wanted to write and that I liked sex, and I hoped one day I could make a career out of both. But never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that only a few short years later, I'd be an AVN-nominated porn babe, as well as the official sex columnist of San Francisco.
Let's do that as well as right there. Let me find a nice place to check it. Yeah, we're going to take it from the as well as,
Okay.
because that'll give you time to put a pause in there if you need to.
Great. As well as the official sex columnist of San Francisco. When the paper first approached me, I didn't even think it was real. They were taking such a long shot on me, and yet I was still so full of Streisand-esque bravado that when the managing editor...
Start right there.
that the
Yeah, I thought I could catch it right there. Let's try it again.
that when the managing editor balked at my proposed title, The Whore Next Door, I refused to budge. The managing editor at the time was dubious about having the focus of the column be on sex work rather than sex in general.
Let me listen back to that real quick. You ever met an audio engineer who knows how to cut between the breaths?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
love it.
all of us. Okay, I want to listen back to this part real quick. Not there anymore, are you, Baxter? Okay, great. So, we are sorry, one second. Great. All right. Thank you for being so patient. Okay, so that's where we'll pick it up from. I'll do us.
But I pointed out that almost every paper in the country had a sex column written by a civilian. Wouldn't it be a good differentiator? Wouldn't it be a good differentiator to be one of the few papers with a hooker on staff?
Perfect. Let me fix that real quick. Okay.
He saw my point, and thus the whore next door was my weekly stump speech for almost 4 years. This book is a mixtape, or as William Goldman, author of The Princess Bride, my favorite book, would say, the good parts version. If I were a Madonna, this would be my immaculate collection, my greatest hits so far. But more accurately, what you're about to listen to is the blood, sweat, and tears from my first 2 years of becoming a real writer. Enjoy. Crazy.
That is the beginning back too.
No, this is Don't We Wish. No, this is one of the first. There's
Okay.
several essays in this one.
I'm going to title this differently.
Still have several pages, but if we get to the end of Act
Oh, no, it's
1
fine.
tonight, I'll be happy.
You getting into what?
Hmm?
As long as you get to where?
Act 1, finish Act 1.
Good.
Boom. And one little edit here. Oh. Okay, I'm going to edit those in a bit. Let's go ahead and keep moving.
Okay.
So we are. I apologize. 1 second. I have to get rid of that.
February 26th, 2014. February 26th, 2014. My first porno, or How I Learned to Stop Trusting Loveline. In the winter of 2009, I sat in my tiny bedroom in the inner Richmond, a glorified laundry room with a linoleum floor and a futon mattress in the corner. I stared at my laptop screen. On it flashed the model application for the Crash Pad series, an independent queer porn site based out of San Francisco. I recognized many of the models on the site, some from porn, most from dance parties in the Mission. The site was bright and friendly looking, soft lines with pink and white letters. Everyone looked like they were having such a good time. Queers of all shapes and sizes having intimate, silly, and sometimes filthy sex, while the voyeuristic camera captured it all. I had discovered the site long before I moved to the Bay Area. It served as a beacon of hope.
Starts in right there. I'm going to take that line right there.
I had discovered the site long before I moved to the Bay Area. It served as a beacon of hope as to what the sex-positive San Francisco dream could look like. I knew from an early age that I was different from my peers. I was fascinated by sexuality. I also liked girls, boys, and especially people who landed somewhere in the middle. Starved for information, as a teenager, I spent many nights huddled next to the radio, listening to the sex advice call-in show, Loveline, at the lowest volume possible so my parents wouldn't hear. Though the hosts were often jerks, it had been my first window into the world of sexuality and served as a crude source of sex education. So, at the end of my senior year of college, when I began to consider the possibility of doing porn, I turned to Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla for advice. I honestly didn't know who else to ask. I got on the air and told them my story. I was a queer college co-ed thinking of doing porn for the first time. Should I go for it? The hosts first asked me if I'd been molested as a child. I told them I had not, but they didn't believe me. They asked why I was considering it, and I told them I was interested in sexual performance and that I wanted to participate in the revolution of documenting real queers having real sex. They didn't get it. They insisted my life would be ruined and I'd never be able to get a job again, even though a part of me knew that this could be a possibility. Getting a resounding no from them only sparked my rebellious spirit and fueled my curiosity about having sex on camera. Now I was finally taking the plunge. I typed in Susie Q for my stage name on the CrashPad site and uploaded some pictures of myself posing naked at Sutro Heights Park. I rolled the new name around in my tongue. I liked the wholesome way it sounded and that it rhymed with floozy. I clicked the pink Submit button at the bottom of the online application form and crossed my fingers. A month later, I woke up to an email confirming that I would be performing in my very first porn scene. I borrowed my roommate's car for the big day. I was still iffy on all the nuances of parking in San Francisco, so I said a little prayer as I abandoned the gold Subaru on a steep, foggy street in Bernal Heights. My stomach was in knots as I knocked on the door of the charming Victorian house that served as the famed CrashPad. The CrashPad is different from mainstream porn sites. On many sites, performers' pay is often based on their gender and the sexual acts. On many sites, performers' pay is often based on their gender and the sexual acts they are willing to do on camera. The sexual acts they are willing to do on camera. At CrashPad, every performer is paid the same rate and is encouraged to do whatever sex acts they negotiate with their scene partner. The set is always fully stocked with condoms, lube, and gloves. Performers are welcome, but not required to use them during the scene. I was signing paperwork when my co-star arrived. I had been casually dating Puck Goodfellow for months, so we already had a natural chemistry with each other that put me completely at ease. 2 hours later, I stepped back onto the sunny sidewalk of Bernal Heights and gazed out over the city where the fog was just beginning to simmer off the bay. I was sure that the sunny day and the lack of a parking ticket on my roommate's car were signs that I was doing the right thing. Thank goodness I didn't listen to those jerks from Loveline. Dun, dun.
Fucking Dr.
All right.
Drew.
What is that girl about anyway?
All right. February 13th, 2015. Sugar Baby Blues. A sex worker is born. The first time I posted an ad seeking a sugar daddy, I still lived with my parents. I had just landed back in my sleepy Central Coast hometown after 6 months on the road as a merch girl with goth indie pop darling Amanda Palmer. While living out of a tour van and making out with bass players were things that truly fulfilled me in the way that a career should, they just didn't pay the bills.
Let's take that line one more time.
While living out of a tour van and making out with bass players were things that truly fulfilled me in the way that a career should, they just didn't pay the bills. I had student loans to pay, and I really didn't want to live with my parents for any longer than absolutely necessary. I had a job, but it paid just $15 an hour, which meant that in order to save enough money to move to San Francisco, I was going to be stuck living in the tool shed turned guest room in the backyard for way longer than was mentally feasible for me. I'm not sure when Sugar Baby first entered my vernacular, but the idea that an older, well-off gentleman would drop some serious cash for the privilege of being my boyfriend didn't sound that impossible. I knew there were scores of wealthy, lonely men in this world, some just a few miles from my house. I pictured a pretty woman fantasy where I made $10,000 a weekend to go to the opera and the Kentucky Derby or shop for dresses on Rodeo Drive. I knew there would.
That line again.
I picked. Oh.
Okay. Right in between the. Right there.
Okay. I knew there would most likely be sex involved, but I also assumed that they'd look.
One time.
I knew there would most likely be sex involved, but I also assumed that he'd look like Richard Gere. I knew that posting internet ads for sexual arrangements in one of. I knew that
I'm gonna take you from right on this section.
I knew that posting internet ads for sexual arrangements in one's hometown is ill-advised, but I did it anyway and crossed my fingers that I wouldn't end up on a date with an old teacher or one of my mom's friends. The first stranger I consented to meet in person looked like a straight Freddie Mercury.
Can we hear something outside?
I did for a second.
Yeah, let's hold for a second. Yeah, it's just my neighbor's kid again.
Oh, no worries. Yeah. Pulls her. Stretches her.
Internet meme told me if you rob a store naked as a minor, nobody can watch the security footage without committing a crime. Modern problems require modern solutions. That's what it said.
Funny. It's very funny. Ooh. She needs a snack.
Okay.
I'm gonna sell the shit out of this thing. I'm so excited.
Great. So.
It was me.
Oh, okay. I was like, what's going on? Okay, great. Okay, that's a nice good chunk of editing out of the way. Back into it.
Let's start there.
Okay, so yeah, we'll start right there.
The first stranger I consented to meet in person looked like a straight Freddie Mercury had
Let's
he
do
lived.
let's do a little, give it just a hair of space,
Okay.
and then I can rough it in a little bit more.
The first stranger I consented to meet in person looked like a straight Freddie Mercury had he lived to be 55, who claimed to be a cosmetics tycoon with an infirm wife. We met in the safari themed basement bar of a weird hotel that my mom likes to go to for lunch. Best salad bar in town. He smelled nice, and when he gave me money, my attraction to him was able to surface and bloom into something that felt real enough. He wore expensive linen pants with no underwear. I didn't dislike hanging out with him, and he brought me expensive bottles of wine every time we got together. I was really into wine then. The last time I saw him, which was also the first time I let him fuck me, I sat naked in the tool shed after he left, sipping the jammy Bordeaux he had brought me. It was too sweet, cloying, like it had gotten too old sitting in his fancy wine cellar in his big house by the ocean. I didn't like it. Later, I got an email from him informing me that I was too chubby for our arrangement to continue. Nothing personal, he assured me. I just prefer girls who look borderline anorexic. So I decided to take a break from the whole sugar situation. I got a waitressing job and started dating a girl I'd gone to high school with. I didn't tell her about my forays into the world of transactional romance. I knew she'd freak out if she knew, even though my waitressing job made me feel cheaper than drinking expensive wine in a tool shed. Eventually, I managed to hustle enough cash to finally make my way to the Bay Area.
Do a pause. I'll push that in.
But once I was stable with a wage slave position at a stationery store, I got antsy again. I could pay my rent, but I couldn't afford much more, and I yearned to experience the incredible parts of San Francisco that seemed so out of reach. Killer seats at AT&T Park, fine dining, opera. Again, my imagination turned to the fairy tale of being someone's sugar baby. So I posted an ad on a website called Seeking Arrangement, hoping to find my Richard Gere lookalike this time. I had far more confidence in the wealthy men of San Francisco. At the very least, there would be more to choose from, and there would be far less of a possibility that they knew my parents.
Yeah, one more time. That line right at the very least.
At the very least, there would be more to choose from, and there would be far less of a possibility that they knew my parents. Okay.
I'll rough it in from there.
February 18th, 2015. Very scary sugar daddy. When I first posted an ad on Seeking Arrangement, a website for mutually beneficial relationships, I knew I was entering the realm of sex work. Wait.
Yep. Come back. Starting on that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Pass.
I knew I was entering the realm of sex work. There would be sex involved.
1 second. Yep. Apologize.
I knew I was entering the realm of sex work. There would be sex involved, but I liked the idea that I had some negotiating power to only hop into bed if the chemistry and the financial offer were right. But the site was clear about maintaining the facade that these are arrangements.
See, now you're having premonitions of it.
Yes.
Right in between facade, I think I'll try and knock it
I'll
out.
just start the whole,
You start the whole line?
but the fact that the site was clear.
Okay.
But the site was clear about maintaining the facade that these arrangements are far closer to traditional dating than anything akin to sex work. Many sugar daddies and mamas made it clear in their profiles that they were not looking for a professional and that escorts would be banned from the site. I wasn't an escort yet, but I had considered the option, and I was under no illusion that what I was doing was somehow not sex work. I was crossing over into the realm of transactional relationships, and this seemed like a good way to dip my toe in to see if I could hack it. Some sugar babies demanded cash up front, even just to meet for coffee, but I wasn't that savvy yet. I was a struggling artist trying to survive in San Francisco on minimum wage, so the promise of free dinner was all the incentive I needed to meet strangers from the internet. Soon, I found myself
Yeah, I'll drop it in.
Soon, I found myself rushing to a downtown sushi bar to meet a mysterious European man who said he could give me up to $7,000 a month to be his girlfriend whenever he came into town for business. I wore my tallest red high heels and a low-cut shirt. I was late, as I usually am, so he was already sitting down when I arrived. He looked and sounded like a bad guy in a Bond movie. He had leathery hands and smelled of strong European cologne. We chatted and drank sake while I put away at least half my weight in raw fish. He was nice enough, but I had trouble understanding him when he spoke, and there was something about the way he watched me that I didn't feel quite right. He was nice enough, but I had trouble understanding him when he spoke, and there was something about the way he watched me that didn't feel quite right. As the meal began to wind down, he asked me if I would like to join him in his hotel room. I politely declined, saying I was too shy to do anything on the first date. It was a lie. I almost always put out on any first date, on or off the clock. He just gave me the creeps, and I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. He just gave me the creeps, and I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. I mean, I ordered green tea ice cream for dessert, but like as soon as possible after that. He continued to push the issue, calling me baby and puckering his sneering lips at me. Look, I finally said, using my real voice for the first time that night. Can't you see where I'm coming from? You're a stranger from the internet. I'm sure you're a very nice guy, but there's a lot of weirdos out there, and a girl has to be careful. There was a tense pause. Then, he said in his Bond villain accent, look, sweetheart, if I wanted to kill you, it wouldn't matter if it was the first date or the 7th. I would do it whenever I wanted. Ice filled my stomach, and sweat soaked the armpits of my sweater. Before my head could even think it, my body stood up and began to put my coat on. This was exactly the kind of guy I prayed not to meet. I was out. He grabbed my hand and stood up to try to reason with me, but as soon as he stood up, all my fear melted away. In my giant red high heels, I towered over him by more than a foot. I snickered, not at all afraid of a man so much smaller than me. I wasted no time clomping out the door, still pumping with adrenaline. Whether we call ourselves sugar babies, escorts, companions, or call girls, we all face similar risks and stigma. After that episode, I stopped looking for a sugar daddy. I found I preferred the safety of the strip club or the ability to check references as an escort. Above all, I liked being able to demand a certain amount of money for a certain amount of my time. I've met other workers who have had successful sugar relationships, but as much as I'd love to be taken to the opera by Richard Gere someday, the sex industry isn't a Pretty Woman fairy tale. It's a business. Hello, Eddie. Ooh, I have to pee again. I'm sorry. So much liquid.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. We're getting close. A couple more. So close. Okay. Ugh, I don't know if I can read this one.
Doing okay?
Yeah.
Do you want to smoke? Do you want to take a minute?
Yeah.
There's a blunt rolled outside.
Yeah. It's time for the blunt.
Also, just as a check-in, what do you think of getting a red leather jacket instead?
Need a smooch to know.
It's a replica of Brad Pitt's jacket from Fight Club.
The answer is yes.
And instead of being a $700 jacket from Lindsay Hart's, it would be a $155 jacket. That may be just as cool.
Okay. Blunt. All right. Yeah, I need that one. It's like the gushy monogamy talk about, like, I wrote it when I was like super in love with all three of my partners who are like, two of them are gone and one of them are very different now. And I just like need a little recharge.
Yep.
I read that. Oh God, this coffee's fucking good. Miss Callie. Oh.
I'm sorry, baby. Whenever your clothes or your toys are broken, you just the bird is so sad. Just right.
Andrew, we got a blunt gun if you would like to blunt.
Is it tobacco?
It is a tobacco-free blunt.
Ah, perfect. Yeah, I'll take a little bit. I get in my super fast editing mode, and then I'm just like crushing, you know.
Totally understand.
It's like, ooh. Just in time.
We're very close. We're almost at the end of Act
Oh,
1.
great.
Yep.
So, here's what we can do.
Yeah.
On how much energy you have.
Yeah.
How many acts are in it?
5.
So I have these mics here, and I'm not really using them for
Mhm.
like anything else, or anything that I couldn't take away and move
Yeah.
around. I can leave that set up exactly like it is for the next month,
Oh my god. Yeah.
and let's just try and
Easy.
like finish it that way. It's the same all the way through.
That sounds great.
There's no reason I didn't want you to feel like you had to get it all of the night.
Yeah, no, totally. It would be great, but I gotta work in the morning. But
So maybe we take a few days where it's super quiet at night. You guys come over a little bit later, you know, or whatever's comfortable. And like I said, I'll leave them up. Is that the bubble gum? Good. You guys happy that you're? I've never seen these.
It's the first time I've seen it. It's the only one. It's the only time that it's tasted like the flavor of the entire way through.
Yeah.
Like it always
Yeah, their
tastes a little bit
flavors
like
are
bubble gum.
always great. And my favorite is the banana. And I like their honey one because even though like it's still so sweet and that it's like a synthetic honey that I eat for it. But it's so spot on.
So honey is not vegan.
No. Have you seen Vegan Beef? Very fun though. You know, I've actually never seen that
It's
movie,
incredible.
and I've been told that I haven't seen it.
He dates the peoples.
really much better than
Yeah. Yeah. Dark.
I liked ants, but then it's like
I love it.
I always loved bugs.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is also problematic. Sexual allegations. So I think they're equal. They cancel each other out.
It's usually really quiet this time, or like 9:45. Every once in a while, we get the guys. Yeah, my place. You are.
I like this one.
Yeah, thank you. There's a great picture.
I stopped shooting because there's
Yeah, you got plenty of it. I'm sure you got even more than you even need for. Yeah. 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 I bought a domain, 2 domains I just bought, and
Through which,
through GoDaddy. Just found a collection of this.
I built my site through GoDaddy.
and I was trying it. It's very easy, and it actually looks pretty good. But even photos that I've taken on my phone that weren't HD quality, they look good on that website.
Who did the interviews with you?
Richard's in there coughing like he's all dry throated or something. So I went and brought him the water. No, he just wants attention.
Remember, what is
Mother's
it?
here. Please take me over.
Yeah.
For comfort, I'm gonna throw up. And he's gonna run and skip.
Put it in the shower and let it walk in there, and I was like, I'm gonna hear this before. Just went right down there and then I could like wash it down, clean it up, cool, done. And he was looking at me like,
So the fridge is off. That's right.
Well, I'm happy.
So the fridge is turned off, but I need to get water.
Oh yeah. We should be okay with the fridge on.
Yeah, you just plug it back in.
If it makes noise and if something starts making noise and we know.
Yeah.
No, for sure, you know what it is that I put that microphone that was a problem. Mike, where are your keys?
I already have them in my
Okay. Okay, and then, so you got your own thing?
Yeah.
Perfect. What was I saying?
Stuff and things.
I forgot. Not important.
Pete?
Oh, that stupid microphone. Self noise.
Whew.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Okay, we only have 3 more essays to the end of Act 1. Squeaky jackets off. Okay, here we go. Right, headphones.
Okay.
December 2nd, 2014. Monogamy. Monogamy. Thanksgiving morning, my belly full of sweet potato pie, I lay on the couch in front of the television, my head resting on my soon-to-be husband's lap, and I squealed with delight as the Radio City Rockettes began to form their world-famous kick line to open Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. On the other side of my fiancé, just inches from my own face, our girlfriend clutched my hand in matched excitement about the coordinating outfits and dance moves happening on screen. Later, my boyfriend arrived with 2 roasted chickens that he raised in his backyard. Then, he and my fiancé tried to get the Dallas Cowboys game on while my girlfriend and I fussed over pumpkin cheesecake and cornbread stuffing. At the end of the night, when the guests had left and we were all exhausted from hosting and cooking for hours, my boyfriend started washing dishes like it was his favorite holiday activity and told me to go sit down and have a glass of wine. I've been curious about alternatives to monogamy for as long as I can remember. Many people believe monogamous relationships are the only option, but I prefer to think that, like sexuality and gender, monogamy is also on a spectrum. In the same way Kinsey hypothesized that very few people are 100% heterosexual or homosexual, I think that many people are not 100% monogamous or non monogamous. Some people truly only want to be with one person for the rest of their lives, and some people are going to be more happy with a rotating cast of guest stars. As long as everyone involved is getting their needs met, the possibilities are kind of endless. But that's what I think now. Back in college, when I started to roll these ideas around in my head in a more serious way, it all didn't seem so simple. At that time, I was in a long-term monogamous relationship with the lesbian ex-cheerleader of my dreams. I loved my girlfriend, but at 22 years old, I was not certain she was the only person I ever wanted to sleep with again. We maintained a healthy and active sex life, but I also yearned for variety and exploration. I loved flirting at parties and making out with a stranger now and then, but I also loved having a long-term partner that I could bring home for the holidays and plan a future with. Every time we broached the subject of opening our relationship, the conversation would end with tears and hurt feelings. But my desire to be with other people didn't go away, nor did her desire for me not to be with other people. We eventually went our separate ways, and she is now blissfully and monogamously married with 2 kids. It seems so obvious now, but at the time we just could not see how incompatible we were when it came to our relationship styles and needs. So, when I started dating my fiance, monogamy wasn't even on the table. We had both been in unpleasant monogamous relationships in the past, and we were both certain we weren't interested in that model any longer. We started slow. When one of us went out of town, we encouraged the other to hook up with old friends, past lovers, and cute strangers, as long as we played safe and didn't come home with any serious partners in another state. And cute strangers, as long as we played safe and didn't come home with any serious partners in another state. During the magical first 6 months of our relationship, when we were just falling in love as hard as we could, we would go to Washington Square Park after brunch on Sundays and read Opening Up, A Guide to Creating and Sustaining Open Relationships by Tristan Taormino out loud to each other and make little notes in the margins about the kind of open relationship we wanted to create and sustain someday. We eventually progressed to dating other people locally, and then on to having more serious outside relationships, and now we share a partner. There's no one right way to do non-monogamy. Every relationship is unique. There are so many different styles and models of relationships. There are as many different styles and models of relationships as there are people in this world. Some people may only be comfortable with a tryst at a swingers party now and then, or the occasional pro-BDSM session for a kink the other partner doesn't enjoy. While others, like myself, will find happiness in a polyamorous triad where all 3 partners are involved intimately and romantically. We definitely haven't got it all figured out. There have been plenty of bumps along the way. We both get jealous now and then, and we both get our feelings hurt on occasion. But the awesome times far outweigh the uncomfortable ones, and not just because threesomes are hot. I imagine that when people think about non-monogamy, they think it's all about sex. And while theories on sperm competition definitely suggest that non-monogamy can result in increased sex drive, the sex is a hugely and sex is a hugely important part of all three of my serious relationships. It's not necessarily the most important part. Seeing my partner be crushed out, Twitter pated, and even heartbroken about another person has brought us closer to each other in the same way that going through those things has brought me closer to my best friends. Moreover, bringing other people who love us into our lives has only increased the amount of love we're both accessing and therefore giving out. Polyamory means many loves, and sometimes that's exactly what it feels like, an abundance of love that continues to grow and multiply. This was my first Thanksgiving spent with all three of my partners. I had fully prepared for there to be some awkwardness and tension at some point during the day. What holiday would be complete without it? But without a doubt, this was one of the best Thanksgivings of my life. Polyamory certainly isn't for everyone. It comes with its own set of challenges and joys, just as monogamy does. Neither relationship model is necessarily better than the other, but there's no denying that it sure is nice to have a few sets of extra hands around during the holidays. Only two more.
Oh.
February 19th, 2014. What to wear to a spanking. She burps. Pardon me. What do I even wear to a party called Bonded Go-Go? I asked my Craigslist roommate, Lindsay, while we ate dinner in our inner Richmond living room. Lindsay was studying library science and spent most of her time watching old episodes of The X-Files. She was no help. All black is generally an acceptable choice for kinky events, I had heard, so I opted for black pleather leggings, a shirt with a fitted blazer, hot pink pumps, and no panties. I was particularly proud of the no panties aspect. I thought it would make me feel sexy, but as I applied my makeup, I began to realize it mostly just made me feel sweaty. I was 24 and clueless about bondage, kink, fashion, and most other things. This was in 2009, and I had just become a full-time San Francisco city dweller after a pretty dramatic breakup with a closet lesbian rapper. I had just become a full-time San Francisco city dweller after a pretty dramatic breakup with a closeted lesbian rapper. I was riding the wave of OkCupid dates, and my most recent encounter had been with a kinky couple. Ooh. I was riding the wave of OkCupid dates, and my most recent encounter had been with a kinky couple who had a dominant, submissive relationship. I had read about such things on the internet and in naughty French novellas, but never had I met a real live couple who called each other master and slave. I found it compelling and arousing. They offered to take me out that night, and I jumped at the invitation. Legend has it that when gay World War II soldiers were discharged, they stayed in the cities they landed in. Port cities like San Francisco subsequently became epicenters for communities of gay veterans who valued the camaraderie, the discipline, and the snappy uniform. Port cities like San Francisco subsequently became epicenters for communities of gay veterans who valued the camaraderie, the discipline, and the snappy uniforms from their days in the armed forces. It is said that this was the beginning of what we now know as leather culture, or BDSM, bondage, dominance, submission, and masochism. These gay soldiers fought for our country, but also for our sexual freedoms. Without the gay leather bars of yesteryear, Without the gay leather bars of yesteryear, we may not be enjoying the pleasures of Folsom Street Fair today, nor would the weekly bondage-a-go-go parties have been a port of entry for new Kingsters in San Francisco for the past 2 decades. I was bubbling over with excitement during the drive as I fantasized about what dark, erotic adventures awaited me. Would it be a small gathering of the 1% wearing feathered masks? Would it be a small gathering of the 1% wearing feathered masks like in Eyes Wide Shut? Or would there be industrial music and people hanging from hooks? I had always liked rough sex, but since moving to San Francisco, I had begun to realize that rough sex was just the beginning. As we entered the club, heavy bass mingled with screams, the sounds of slapping, and an occasional moan. A makeshift dungeon was roped off on the far side of the bar, complete with whips, and plenty of girls hung from the ceiling in elaborate rope bondage. I sat down with my dates at a table. We ordered drinks and, why not, some calamari. I tried my very best not to stare too long at anyone. Then another guest joined us. A muscular black man who was introduced to me as Jack Hammer. I could smell leather. I could smell the leather of his pants, and I liked the tattoos on his arms. He was a retired Marine, a current porn star, and a bondage enthusiast. Do you like to get tied up? He asked me. I don't know, I said. Let's see. My bravado convinced him, but I gulped as I followed him, puppy-like, into the dungeon. What color underwear are you wearing? Jack Hammer whispered in my ear as he grabbed me by the hair and began to slide the heavy hemp rope across my skin. My knees weakened and my face got hot. I'm not wearing any panties. I purred and rubbed my pleather-clad ass against him. What? He pulled suddenly away. He was not pleased. You can't wear pants when you get tied up, and if you don't have underwear on, you'll get kicked out. Despite the seemingly unbridled debauchery, Bondage-a-Go-Go follows strict parameters in accordance with liquor laws. There are no nipples, no actual sex, no genitalia permitted at or near the party. I felt so stupid. I thought my choice to go commando was bold and sexy and convenient since I hadn't done laundry. But it was a rookie mistake. Now, my epic night of BDSM fantasy was just another awkward night of dating. My heart sank all the way down to my hot pink heels. Jack smiled. His dimples were deadly. He tied my hands above my head, reached into his bag, and brought out a small single-tail whip. Well, I guess I'll just have to whip you then, he said. Next time you'll know better. The next time, I did. Okay, it's the last one.
I'll send that to you and you can use it as your phone.
That's great. June 17th, 2015. Control Freak, discovering the dominatrix within. I'll be back at 11. You just act like a peasant. I got a bow on my panties because my ass is a present. Nicki Minaj's voice was bumping hard in my ears.
Boy,
Okay.
super cool guy there.
Still.
Getting cooler.
Getting cooler.
I'll be back at 11. You just act like a peasant. I got a bow on my panties because my ass is a present. Nicki Minaj's voice was bumping hard into my ears.
Will you take that line?
Okay.
Mhm.
Nicki Minaj's voice was bumping hard into my ears from the tinny speaker of the iPhone propped up against my truck's dashboard. When she was suddenly interrupted by an incoming call. Though I'm notorious for sending unexpected calls to voicemail, something told me I should answer this one. It was an old college friend who had recently decided to experiment with some power play in the bedroom with her on top. The results had been electric. Her partner loved it, and she was surprised by how much she also enjoyed it. I didn't know who else to call, she said exuberantly, like she had just gotten off Splash Mountain and her shirt was still wet. I'm glad you called me, I said. I know exactly how you feel. Power and the consensual exchange of it is my favorite thing to play with in the bedroom. I entered the world of BDSM as a submissive, hungry for experiences that played with pain and situations that allowed me to give up control. But when I entered the sex industry, customers and fans often approached me by saying, "Hello, mistress, how may I serve you?" Maybe it was my dark hair and Betty Page-inspired bangs, or maybe they simply saw something in me that I had yet to discover. The idea of being a leather or latex-clad dominatrix torturing, sniveling, submissive men didn't turn me on, but I was great at going through the motions, and I did enjoy how theatrical being a dominant allowed me to be. So, long before I ever played on top in my own bedroom, I had plenty of practice while on the clock. I became astute at playing the role of sadistic goddess or cruel mistress, but these fantasies belonged to the men who paid me. In my own fantasies, I always cast myself in the innocent, submissive role until one fateful night in a fancy San Francisco hotel room. I had seen this particular client several times whenever he came in town for business. That night, I had already given him a hard spanking, put clothespins on his nipples, and sat on his face, so before I moved from the bedroom to the bathroom, so I could piss in his mouth, I needed a break. "Bring me a glass of wine," I told him as I reclined slowly on the white sofa, trying to maintain my mistressness despite my growing fatigue. He walked over to the bottle of dry Bordeaux he had brought for me to enjoy during our session, poured me a glass, and began to walk back to me. "Wait," I said. "I want you to crawl." His eyes lit up as he dropped down to his knees and began navigating the difficult task of crawling across the room while not spilling red wine all over the expensive hotel suite's carpet. Watching this wealthy, powerful man naked and struggling to complete a task for my pleasure gave me an unexpected stirring beneath my vintage lingerie. Was I actually turned on by this man's submission? After that night, my arousal while playing the dominant role only grew. I found myself caring less about my clients' fantasies and more about fulfilling my own. Eventually, I started playing the dominant role off the clock, which opened a whole new world of possibilities. I realized that my dominance was my own and didn't have to look like anyone else's version. Being called mistress and slinking around in a latex catsuit didn't do it for me. But riding a beefy guy around like a pony and slapping him with a riding prop while he called me princess was a different story. I think I had been so caught up in the idea of what a dominant female should and shouldn't be that I had never thought to examine and make space for the dominant desires that I had. Back in my truck, I congratulated my old friend on the discovery of her inner dominant and welcomed her into the sisterhood of girl bullies. I said goodbye, placed my iPhone back on my dashboard, and put on a new playlist. Boys only want love if it's torture, said Taylor Swift. I turned up the little speaker as high as it could go. End of Act 1.
You get one more end of Act 1.
End of Act 1. Intermission.
Epically good.
Great. Awesome. We did it.
You did a great job.
Thank you. You did a great job.
Oh, I did nothing. I just tried not to fuck it up.
So good. Okay. We're going to get this done.
Yeah.
I'm very
And
pleased.
we're going to have fun doing it.
so much fun. So much fun. She sleeps. Those mandarins really saved the day. They really saved the day. I have one. I put it in my tea. So now it's like a minty agave.
That's awesome.
That's some fancy stuff right there.
So,
Thank you for watching, friends.